I'm a scientist, and one of my responsibilities is to look after animals used for research. I also look after animals that are sick or injured that are brought in by members of the public to a university vet school. Animals are my daily concern, and I have the greatest respect for them. But I have two simple questions for you. You see a dog and a child on a railway line. A train is approaching, fast. You know you only have time to rescue one. Which is it to be, the dog or the baby? Second question. You're the Prime Minister. Do you stop all medical research with animals and possibly let people die? And domestic animals will die too. This treatment of a brain tumour is being done to save the life of a pet dog. It's made possible only because we have medicines and anaesthetics tested on rats and other animals. The answer to both of my questions is a hard one. It's also inescapable. Human life is more precious than that of animals. In our society, we do all we can to save lives and to improve the quality of life for those that become ill. The list of killer and debilitating diseases is huge: cancer, AIDS, heart disease, and mental illness. The case for using animals in medical research to help people like these, I believe, has been well argued. At the moment, computers and tissue culture can't recreate all the conditions of a living system. Only research animals like these can do that. Here, for example, scientists are looking at fetal growth in both animals and humans. So in this programme, we're not going to deal with the should we or shouldn't we use animals argument. Instead, we're going to pose a question which makes us human. Is the care we give to animals used for medical research the best that a civilised society can deliver? We asked 3 young people to take a look at an animal laboratory and to speak to an animal technician. We showed them everything they wanted to see, and we answered all of their questions honestly and truthfully. What you'll see is edited from 2 days of visits and conversations. We've included as many images and questions and answers as possible, and we have not left anything out that may be controversial. Hello, nice to see you. Thanks for coming along, thank you. All the students are typical members of your generation. They like music, fashion, cinema, video games and television. Hannah wants to make a career in medical research, but wants to know more about how the animals are used.
Well, I do recognise that there are a lot of emotive issues attached to animal testing. And so I'm here today to find out the most important issue about the conditions they're kept in and about the general attitude of animal technicians toward the animals, you know, whether they're given lots of affection.
2 of Gracie's relatives have multiple sclerosis, a disease that affects 85,000 people in the UK. Grace is only too well aware of the need for research using animals, but is also keen to find out how the animals are treated and the sort of people who look after them.
I'm not sure what I'm expecting to see at the animal facility. I've seen the pictures that animal rights activists have shown on websites and on posters. I'm slightly apprehensive about the amount of space the animals will have, what their behaviour's like, what they've got to do, whether they've got toys and things to keep their minds occupied. But I'm trying to go in there with an open mind and make my own opinions.
Philip has no deep personal reason for wanting to know about animal research. He simply wants to see for himself and form an unbiased opinion.
What does worry me a bit about the labs is possibly that it could be like what I see on these websites. There is a lot of horrendous things going on. I will be asking a lot of questions today because I want to find out as much as I can, truthfully, about what goes on here.
First, we spoke to Tim, who's a senior animal technician with one of the country's leading pharmaceutical companies. Tim's going to talk them through a videotape which shows some of the animals he works with and what they're used for. But Tim, tell us why we just couldn't go along and film in your company.
Unfortunately, in the past, technicians have been targeted by animal rights activists, which is obviously very scary for them. And that's why in the video you'll find that some of their faces have been blanked out as well.
OK, Tim, can we have a look at the video now then, please?
The first one that we see are mice. These mice are used for tissue repair, which is making wounds from burns better. They don't actually get burnt, but their skin is cut, and then we put compounds on to make them heal.
Are the size of the cages standard?
Yeah, they are standard through the industry, and the number of animals per cage is governed by the Home Office. And as you can see, they're all on sawdust, and they all have environmental enrichment in their cages. This is to encourage natural behaviour. The enrichment is a plaything, basically, for the mice to stop them getting bored. The next part you'll see is the cats. These cats, as you can see, are all what we call gang caged, so they're all in a group. These cats are used for animal health studies, flea studies.
Are they cleaned out regularly?
They're cleaned out 365 days a year. The litter tray is fresh every day.
Do they ever get to go outside the cage?
They get to go outside the cage, but they don't get to go outside the animal facility. The reason being is because they can catch diseases. You have to be aware that a happy, healthy animal is a good animal to test animal drugs as well as human drugs on.
And have they lived there all their life?
They are specially bred.
So they wouldn't have any sort of distinction between, like, say, their natural habitat and the animal house?
No, the animal house is their natural habitat.
Right.
Do the scientists ever play with the cats?
Not usually, it's more like the animal technicians. We encourage that to happen. A happy cat is a good cat to work with. If you have a cat that's stressed or angry, it will put up, obviously, chemicals in the blood that could affect the drugs that you're actually looking at.
So do they enjoy human company, or do they fear the people in white coats?
They enjoy human company. This is the experimental dog unit. These dogs are used for cardiovascular work, so people with heart problems and heart attacks. As you can see, most of the animals are pair housed.
Why do you do that?
They are gregarious animals, they are pack animals.
So why not keep them in a bigger group then instead of pairs?
The bigger group causes problems. Other dogs within the group become stressed because they're being bullied by other ones.
Do you ever give them time with the other dogs?
Every day we let them out twice a day to ensure that they get a run with up to 10 dogs. So this enables them to act normally in the pack surroundings, but then they don't have the stress of dominance.
Do they have names or numbers?
They all have numbers because that's law that they have an identification number, but they're all given their own personal names as well.
Are the animal facilities inspected?
Yes, the Home Office actually inspects the facilities up to 6 to 8 times a year, and a majority of those are unannounced.
How much does it cost to maintain the average dog?
It can average out at about £50,000. With these dogs, you find that they're very affectionate, they're pleased to see us, and they don't mind being picked up and carried around. And with this dog particularly, he's got ECG studs, just like earrings. And it enables us to take an ECG reading from the same spot each time. So the dogs don't have to be shaved or clipped or messed about too often. Also, this dog has got what we call a carotid loop. The carotid loop is the carotid artery which has been exposed and covered with skin. This enables us to then take blood pressure readings without having to have the dog fixed in one position and then shaved and then trying to get a cuff around a limb, which is very, very, very difficult in a dog. And as you can see with this loop, it doesn't cause any distress to hold it for the dog. And in fact, the dogs are very comfortable with us handling it.
What proportion are bred in captivity?
All our animals are bred in captivity. None of the animals are brought from the RSPCA or dog pounds or anything like that.
At the end of the experiments, how are the animals put down?
The animals are put to sleep the same way as that a vet would put your pet animal to sleep. So, yeah, it's through a lethal injection of an anaesthetic.
And how do you feel personally when you have to put down an animal that you've perhaps been working with for a year or so?
Well, some of the animals that I work with, we've worked with for 5 or 6 years, and yeah, you do become very attached to them. We've obviously spent a lot of time and care looking after their welfare. If I know I've done the best for that animal and that animal's done the best for medical research, then I think it's justified.
Do you ever have any cases where people have mistreated animals, and what kind of disciplinary action do you take against them?
We haven't, within my facility, seen anything, but we have in place a procedure where anybody that is seen or is known to have mistreated an animal would be fired, would lose their job immediately. And not only that, we could have actually prosecute them. Now, the mini pigs that we have here are Danish. All these pigs are used for urogenitals, which is bladder problems. The bladder problems usually occur in humans at a later date, as in older patients. So these pigs stay around for quite a long time. They are a very good model to man. So rather than using hundreds and hundreds of mice, you could usually use 1 or 2 pigs to do the same. So once again, we are reducing the numbers of animals by looking at different species. These animals have got what we call an IV line. Now, these lines go into the pig, into a vein, because to take a blood sample from a pig is very difficult because their veins are very deep. Just one small operation would allow us to put that into a vein so that we can just sample without causing any additional pain to the pig.
Are they given anaesthetic?
For the operations? Yeah. Oh yes, definitely. Full surgical anaesthesia is given. You wouldn't be able to operate on any animal by law without the proper anaesthesia and pain relief. I would say they're probably given more than what your vets would give.
Because it's often used in propaganda by animal rights protesters that they're not given some sort of anaesthetic.
I would say a majority of experiments within this country are done without anaesthetics because most of the experiments within this country are blood samples. So you don't need an anaesthetic to take a blood sample.
So with regards to the more invasive procedures, the ones that were perhaps a little more controversial, what procedures do you have to go through legally before you obtain an animal to experiment on?
There is many procedures that you have to go through. The first thing you have to go through before you get anywhere near an animal is to ensure that the reason why you want to use an animal, there's no alternative. If there is no alternative, and you must have researched that then you can then apply to get a licence to use an animal for a certain procedure.
Next, we visited a lab where a range of animals, including monkeys, are used to test drugs. These drugs are for treating depression, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's and other mental diseases.
These are all squirrel monkeys, and these monkeys, their natural habitat is South America. Now, we house them in social groups because they are social animals, and as well as housing them in social groups, we have to, if we've got animals on one side of the room, we want them to see their companions on the other side of the room. And rather than house them singly, when you house them in groups, it just cuts down the stress level because an animal that's stressed is no use for research work. If you look on the back wall of the enclosures, we've got some coloured blocks. It's a bit like a climbing frame, and it allows them to climb up the walls and sit in these blocks. These monkeys always like to be above the animal technicians or the caregivers, and that's because in their wild habitat, where they come from in South America, they live in the tree canopy and they seldom come onto the forest floor. When they're up in the tree canopy, they feel safe from predation, so in the laboratory environment, they live up high in the cage as well.
What is your personal opinion of the size of the cage? Do you think it's adequate?
I think these cages are excellent for squirrel monkeys. It provides a lot of vertical movement for them, and there's a great deal of environmental enrichment.
I had a question on the diet. What do they eat in the wild, and how is that replicated?
Yep, normally squirrel monkeys, which are New World monkeys, they eat fruits and berries and small insects in the wild, which they catch on the trees. In the laboratory environment, we give them pellets which contain all the nutrients the monkey needs. We also give them fruits, some vegetables, some nuts. You can see a monkey behind you there which is using a dip feeder. Now what that does is the monkey lifts up the black lever there and is able to get a syrupy solution. And what we're trying to mimic here is they normally tear away the bark of trees in their natural or wild habitat, and they get a food reward by means of sap from the tree. Now obviously we can't do that with trees in the environment, so we use this dip feeder. They also spend about 80% of their time in the wild or natural habitat, foraging for food. So we have to make them work a little bit harder to get the food within the laboratory environment.
But why use squirrel monkeys?
The reason we use squirrel monkeys is that we've got a lot of historical data on these monkeys. Because we've got a lot of historical data, it means we're using fewer monkeys in tests. There's no natural lighting, so what they've done is they've made a tunnel to reflect the light into the monkeys so that they've got a normal photo period or life cycle.
Is their behaviour normal compared to how they'd be behaving in the wild?
We could certainly never mimic the conditions of the wild, but I would say, in my experience, the monkeys here, the conditions we provide them mimic most of what they have in the wild. You have to remember that these monkeys weren't taken from the wild, they were bred within a laboratory environment, so they've never been in a natural habitat.
If any of the monkeys get injured, do they get treated and then sent back into the cages, or do they get put down?
Yes, if any of these monkeys are sick or injured, we have a team of veterinary surgeons who provide immediate care for the monkeys. Once the monkey is cared for and is recovered, it will go back into its normal social group. These are quite large male rhesus monkeys, so they're very strong. Now you can see the enclosures they're housed in. Again, we've got environmental enrichment and we've got loads of space for them as well. You'll see from these enclosures that the monkey can go from this first enclosure, it can climb through here, underneath and into the large enclosure here as well. And they've got ropes and swings and various other environmental enrichment devices.
Why are these two monkeys paired together?
In this particular pen, Phil, we have one very dominant animal and one very submissive animal. And in our experience, we find that pairing works very well with the dominant with the submissive animal.
When do these monkeys become of no use in medical research?
There's never a case within this facility that the monkeys become of no use. When they're finished on experiment, then they're placed back into the breeding colony as stud males. These are all male rhesus animals.
How regularly are these monkeys tested on?
It depends on the study. The monkeys may be tested on an individual daily basis or they may be tested weekly. It all depends on the study.
Do you ever change what's inside the cages?
Yes, we do change the environmental enrichment devices because monkeys can get easily bored, so we have to review our policies in frequent intervals.
You mentioned that you don't breed the monkeys here on site.
Yeah.
So where do you get the monkeys from and how do you make sure that the humane standards you have here are maintained at your suppliers?
We obtain all the primates from what's called designated breeders and suppliers, and these breeders and suppliers are inspected frequently by our own veterinary surgeon staff and by the UK Home Office. So we'll just slowly walk to this end of the pen. These are rhesus monkeys, these are old world monkeys. These monkeys are about 2 to 3 kilograms in body weight and they're about just over 2 years old. That's great. That's fine. There's a great deal of environmental enrichment in this room. We've got this natural light again coming through the blocks at the back. In their natural or wild habitat, they like to have water, access to water, and this is why we've put the water feature in here. They can paddle in it, they can play in the water. And all of this enrichment, it gives them vertical space to climb. They're great climbers, they're very agile.
Well, because primates have feelings, does this mean you have to take extra care in maintaining their welfare?
Yes, Hannah, primates have got feelings similar to ours, but you have to take extra care looking after all laboratory animals, not just primates, but primates are certainly a special case.
The monkeys over there look like they've completely demolished the area. Why go to such an expense? Why not just build something more stable?
We go to such an expense because we care about the animals that we're using for research. The technicians care and the scientists care. And we've got great compassion for the animals we use, so we don't mind spending a lot of money on enclosures, even although we know that we're going to wreck them. We just move them to a new enclosure and redo it again.
And the cages here look very different from the enclosure. They're quite bare, they haven't got any environmental enrichment. How long are the periods of time that the monkeys spend in these alternative cages?
These cages here are used to house monkeys individually for very short periods of time while we're looking at their behaviour.
So with these smaller rhesus monkeys, what tests do you do?
The main tests we do are drug metabolism studies.
This CB
CD player to my right, what's that?
The CD player is to provide the monkeys with background music. There are some studies have suggested that to have background music within the unit makes the monkeys less stressed and much more calmer.
So you've had a chance to look around today. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask me?
Back in the labs, why did we have to keep changing overalls in each area?
The reason we had to change the overalls is that we were going from one monkey species into another area where other species of monkey are housed, and it prevents cross-infection.
Why not just put research funds into alternatives to animal testing?
There is already tens of millions of pounds spent by the scientific community on the development of alternatives.
How often are the animals given health checks?
The animal technicians are there every day, Hannah, and if there's any problem at all, they'll call the vet immediately.
How do you deal with aggressive or uncontrollable animals?
In terms of the monkeys, when the rhesus monkeys become older and they reach quite a large body weight, then we separate them off so that they don't start fighting with each other and injure themselves.
Are all the animals put down?
Well, 87% of the animals we use for testing are rodents, and at the end of rodent testing, in most cases the animals are humanely killed.
Why?
The reason we humanely kill animals at the end of the testing is we have to conduct a post-mortem examination on them and take some tissues. However, the rhesus monkeys you saw today in this facility, we put these back into the breeding colony as they get older, and the squirrel monkeys you were able to see are here until they reach a very old age. There may come a time with the squirrel monkeys when they get old and infirm that it's kinder just to humanely kill them.
What are the differences in conditions in cosmetic laboratories compared with medical laboratories?
It's irrelevant to what we're talking about today because cosmetic testing has been banned within the UK.
Do you think then that increased transparency would reassure the public about the conditions that the animals are kept in?
I think there is increasing transparency within the laboratory animal science industry. It's a difficult one though because some people are concerned about opening their doors to members of the public for fear of extremists gaining entry. And that's one of the reasons why we're making this programme, to try and pass on information.
I hope that what you've seen and heard has answered the questions you may have had. No scientist and no animal technician wants animals to suffer. The welfare of animals used in medical testing is protected by the law. But more significantly, these animals are protected by people who really care.
Other people might try and tell you something different. That's their right. But it's your right to make up your own mind after looking at the evidence. You have to decide if the care of these animals, vitally important to our own health and that of our pets, is the best that a civilised society can provide. Bandit, come on. That's a good boy. That's a good boy.